moment of our break leadership electives. It's a tremendous honor and privilege to have Rabbi Burg speaking to us here today as part of our series. Rabbi Burg's leadership experiences have spanned from NCSY, the Orthodox Union, the Wiesenthal Center, Aish Torah, WZO. And just in my experience here in Aish, getting to see Rabbi Burg's work firsthand, the amazing dedication, commitment, which has allowed our yeshiva and our organization to grow and to build from strong foundations to really big dreams, is a really, really inspiring thing. There are a few people that I've met in my lifetime, short life so far, but that have displayed such care and dedication, love of Jews, and determination to really make a difference, like Rabbi Burg. So the fact that you have the opportunity to hear from him, some ideas about leadership and making a difference, is a unique and amazing opportunity for you. Thank you, Rabbi Burg, for joining us.
Thank you, Ranel said. I actually came just for that intro, so you should feel warm and fuzzy all over, because one of the things that you'll learn in terms of leadership is most of the time it's not sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of things to work through. One of the things I always quote is that one of my heroes in life is David Melech. And I quite often find myself reading Shmuel. It's really mostly Shmuel Bet, but it starts probably halfway through Shmuel Aleph. Read the book of Samuel. I read the book of Samuel over and over and over again with David. And I always tell people that, in the beginning of David's life, his father-in-law tried to kill him. At the end of his life, his son tried to kill him. In the middle, the Philistines, the Philistines tried to kill him. He still got a lot done. So you get this sense, and anyone that's been following the weekly parshas in the last, 2 months, as we literally went through Baaloscha, which was the first rebellion that Moshe had to handle, and then we went on to Shlach with the spies, and then we went on to Korah. Literally, you get a sense that being a leader within the Jewish people has a lot of challenges out there. But yet, you have a certain understanding that you're working on behalf of Kadosh Baruch Hu, and you don't really much choice. You got the best boss in the world, and he needs you to do certain things. And many times in life, he wants to see how badly you want to do those. I'll just start very, very brief with Torah, which many of you may have heard about me before. I talk about it all the time. I say it all the time. I think it's important to put in context. And then I was thinking of maybe just giving you a case study. I had the honor of when I went to school, it was funny, I came to Aish, and I took over Aish, and we had a lot of challenges 11 years ago when I first came in. And one of the things they told me was, you're really lucky, you're educated, you went to graduate school, you have that background, I'm like, I went to graduate school for medieval Jewish history. It didn't exactly, but so along the way I did some other kind of educational experiences. So one of them was I went to Harvard Business School. They have like a summer nonprofit training, and what's amazing there is they're obsessed with case study. Literally, you do 5 to 7 case studies every day. You take a certain case and you understand, you learn it. So I was thinking maybe I would relate one of those cases of something we had built, so that could, I think, be helpful to you in your leadership. But the first thing I was going to mention right off the bat, which I talk about all the time because I think it's so important to understanding the foundation of Judaism, was that the first story you open up in the Chumash is the story of Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, right? And of course, the first story, they're told you can eat from anything in the garden, just not the tree of knowledge. And sure enough, the snake comes along, and Eve eats it, Adam eats it, and then God shows up. God says to Adam, what'd you do? What does he say? She made me do it. Goes to Eve, what'd you do? Snake made me do it. So literally right out in the beginning of the creation of man, everyone's passing the buck. No one can take responsibility. What about the kids, Cain and Abel, right? Cain kills Abel because he's jealous of him. God comes along and says, where's your brother? And he says, am I my brother's keeper? Totally, no one can take responsibility for anything. Then the next parsha is Noah. Noah was a tzaddik, right? The Torah, God calls him a tzaddik. Took responsibility for himself. What didn't he take? Communal responsibility. Didn't take responsibility for anyone else but himself, right? And that is where Avram Avinu comes along. And we could spend hours going through Tanakh on this theme. That's not all what I want to do today. But I think it's so important just to start with this because get this wisdom law of responsibility, right? I have a little patch there, right? But there's a reason our ethos goes to responsibility, because then Avram Avinu comes along. There's a famous Rambam that talks about how Avram was not the first monotheist, right? He wasn't the first person to believe in one God. There was Adam and Noah and Methuselah and Hanoch and the Sheva Eber, a whole bunch of people that believed in one God, right? But the Rambam says that Avram comes along, he calls him the Amudo Shel Olam, the pillar of the world, and he busts up all the idols, right? You know the story. His father had an idol shop, and Avram busted it all up, put the hammer in the largest idol's hand, and when his dad said, "What happened?" he said, "He did it," right? And making a point. But anyway, he busts up all the idols. So the Ravid, the little tiny commentary, you gotta look really closely, right next to the Rambam, says, well, Shem V'Aver had a yeshiva. Famously, Shem V'Aver had a yeshiva that the Avos learned at. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all went to learn there, right? Why didn't Shem V'Aver bust up the idols? That's a good question, right? They had a yeshiva. That's how God. So the Kesef Mishnah gives a beautiful, beautiful answer. He says the following. He says that you have to understand. He says, Yeshiva Shem V'Aver. It's a beautiful room like this. You have scrolls that talk about God and monotheism over there, right? And if you knew the secret handshake or the secret knock, you can get inside and learn about God. But if not, then you're stuck outside. You wouldn't know anything. Avraham Avinu is the first person that comes along and takes responsibility for the whole world, and he shakes people by the lapel and says, "Do you know that there's one God?" Right? And when it comes to God, comes to him and said, "You know what? I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah." Right? They're evil, wicked places, Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to destroy them. What does Avraham Avinu do? He starts fighting with God. Fighting with God over these horrible, no good people. If there are 50 righteous people, we spare the cities 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, right? In the end, he loses the battle. But he starts this movement of radical responsibility. I have to take responsibility for anything and everything that I see around the world. Right? Now that's on a metaphysical, spiritual, prayer level. But then when his nephew gets kidnapped, what does he do? Avraham Avinu, this sweet man who sits in a tent that has 4 openings for just to do chesed, what does he do when he finds out his nephew's kidnapped? He goes to war. Sound familiar? Right? Jews get kidnapped, we go to war. Because he's setting down a precedent which you can find throughout Tanakh, throughout the Bible, throughout Jewish history, of the importance of taking responsibility. Now, our ethos here, values, it's not by coincidence, are wisdom. We believe that every single Jew needs to know Torah because Torah is God. Really, that's the pathway to God. And the second one is love, because that's the only way we believe that a person should conduct themselves with each other. And then finally, responsibility. And that is where I think Rav Noach Weinberg built an institution that was so unlike any other in the world. Is he understood this responsibility. We just had a meeting, right, with the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. A couple of us that are here, we're just upstairs, and we were meeting with one of the ministries, and it was a great meeting. The 4 young men that were there representing us did an outstanding job. I'm always a little nervous in those things, you know. I ask them any question you want, you know. But they were amazing. When we get to the end, and he's a wonderful guy. And just, you know, Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, they have the portfolio to deal with Jews outside of Israel. That's their mandate. So they're basically like, how do these 4 guys get to be so great? Like you know, how do you do this? You know, and then we're shooting this, that, etc. But to me, we were talking about responsibility, right? That Berkowitz gets up, Rav Noah, everyone gets up and says, you got to take responsibility for Jewish people. It's the most important thing in the world to our religion, right? Because if you really, you know, you have to give people that sense of doing, that sense of building, that sense of creating, right? That's how you become stronger yourself, right? If you're passionate about something, you want to work and build towards it. So let me just give you an example. This is the case study, and by the way, at any point in time, ask me. I think we're going till 3 o'clock. Is that correct? Okay, good. So I want to give you just something from my career. I had I'll just tell you a little bit about my career, a little bit about my background and how I wound up standing here in front of you. I grew up in Brooklyn. My father was a rabbi, a pulpit rabbi of a shul in Brooklyn for 45 years. And I went to Israel for 2 years, went to Yeshiva University, got my smicha, got my master's, all that good stuff. But when I came back from Israel, I was pretty inspired, and I joined NCSY. And I wound up spending 22 years in NCSY. NCSY is a youth group the Orthodox world. Some of you may know NIFTY or USY or BBYO. It's kind of akin, but with Orthodox kind of regulations, restrictions. And so I joined NCSY for 22 years. My last 8 years, I wound up being the international director of NCSY. When I first started, I was in Central East region for 9 years. That's Cleveland, Columbus, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo. And then I became the regional director of West Coast NCSY for 5 years. And that is from San Diego up to Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, out to El Paso, Texas, right? Which is awesome for me. I came from Brooklyn. I didn't realize there were Jews outside of Brooklyn. Like going to Queens was a big deal for us. And so I got to spend a lot of time in a lot of places and got to meet a lot of people along the way on my journey. And so I'm 19, I start running around Shabbatons, I start seeing this thing, and in my mind I'm always like, how can I make it better? What can I do more? How can I would do certain things like, there were 3 Shavuos in a row and I was a single guy and I throw a bunch of guys in a car, we drive to Pittsburgh for every Shavuos, to give shiurim all night. We did a lot of stuff. And then I'm assistant director. And when you're assistant director, you're like, you're not really fully in charge. You're trying to figure things out and move along, etc. And then I became the regional director of West Coast, right? That was like my first kind of being in charge of something, right? So I had a lot to learn there and a lot to figure out. But one of the things that when I got there, I was told, and again, it was probably, the left third of North America. Okay, because you're talking about Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, all those places up here, Seattle, that whole area, down to Portland, all California, out to Arizona and to El Paso, right? So it's a big part of our country. One of the things I was told was the following. I was told that public school kids that come to our regional, right? NCSY, very big, we do these regional Shabbaton. You have a Shabbaton, right? You take care of Shabbos, and it's fabulous. Everyone comes in Thursday night, they stay till Sunday morning, and it's filled with Ruach, and you inspire everyone. So I was told that public school kids come from outside of Los Angeles, right? So if you're getting kids from Vancouver or San Diego or these other places, they're mostly going to be more secular background. And in LA, it's more yeshiva kids we get, right? From Eula or even back then Shalhevet, right? It started, right? And that was the breakdown, right? We don't really do public school kids in Los Angeles. So I started looking around trying to figure that piece out, and then something very fortuitous happened kind of concurrently. But the first thing I started to realize is that if you take the combined Jewish community, the combined Jewish organized community, right? So if you were to take Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Ultra-Orthodox, Hasidic, Yeshivish, you name it, anyone that is within the Jewish framework, right? And you were to say to them, how many mailing addresses do we have for teenagers, right? So the answer I got was 5,000, right? There were 5,000 mailing addresses that we had for teenagers, the entire Federation Jewish community in Los Angeles, right? How many Jewish teenagers were in Los Angeles? The answer was 30,000. Now again, my dad is about 25 years old, okay? I'm sure the numbers may have changed a little bit, right? But there were 30,000 Jewish teens in Los Angeles. And we only knew, and when I say we, it's the royal we, right? I'm including in there people that may belong to Reform Temple that never actually go, right? But we only knew of 5,000, which means I have 25,000 13 to 17-year-olds missing from the Jewish people in Los Angeles. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Yeah. That's not so good, right? Right? It's not so good. But, I know we have our community, and no one's kind of paying attention to that. Okay. Concurrently, something very interesting happened. There were public school clubs, right, that were called, that were in these different public schools that were being run by the JCCs. JCCs are Jewish Community Centers, right? JCCs are places that, anyone here been to a JCC? You play basketball there, you play tennis, you go hang out in a JCC, right? So the JCC system in Los Angeles would run these public school clubs. They would go to these public schools whenever it was, right? So the JCC were all connected. There were a whole bunch of them in LA. And for years, they were always in the black. They never had any money problems. They were totally fine, right? The CFO retired, and then they found out that, see if any accounting majors in the room, right? That they used to have an endowment. So what's the story with an endowment? An endowment is money that just kicks off interest, right? What are you not supposed to do with an endowment? What?
Take for the principal.
Yeah. You're not supposed to spend it, right? This CFO would keep himself in the black by just pulling money out. So they always thought that they had this money sitting there. This guy retires, and they're like, "Oh my God, we're bankrupt." Like the whole JCC system collapses overnight, right? Like, and they had to sell the majority. It was really bad, right? I mean, bad for them, good for me. I'll explain why, right? So what happened? So all these programs fall apart. So one of my guys like, "Hey, we should do this public school program." So the first school we went into was a school called Hamilton High School. Hamilton High School, you guys know Hammy, right?
Yeah.
So Hamilton was the first one that we did it in LA. We wound up starting a club there. We knew a teacher, and then we realized that I used to explain that what was the issue with doing outreach today? What's the biggest issue with doing Jewish outreach in North America? We don't really know where the Jews are, right? Even if, they're not in synagogues, they're not in JCCs, they're not in anything Jewish. The overwhelming majority, if you take today Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, pro-Israel, AIPAC, every Jew that's somewhat connected to something, we're less than 30% in North America, which means over 70% of Jews, we don't know who they are. They don't do anything Jewish.
Isn't that
right?
the same stat? Like that's the amount that marry non-Jews. 70% of American Jews.
It depends on which city, whichever, but
not
yeah,
30%.
it's super high. I don't even think we really know because they're gone.
Yeah.
We don't really know what's going on with that 70%, right? So the issue is, right, how do I find my Jews? Where do I find them? So I had a premise, right, that from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m., Monday through Friday, I knew where every single Jew aged 13 to 17 was. Where were they? In school. So if I can go into these public schools, right, show up, guess what? I can hang out with all these Jewish kids that are not connected to anyone, right? So we did Hamilton. We started doing a couple of schools, right? Now, what? Beverly, sure, right? And I remember at one point I presented the Federation, right? We presented the Federation. They're like, "Can you explain us your strategy and philosophy and why this is becoming so popular?" I was like, "Okay, well, let me see." We go to the pizza store. We pick up a lot of pizza. We go there during lunch hour. The kids are hungry, and they come eat, and we hang out with them and talk about Israel and stuff, right? They're like, brilliant, right? So I happen to be, in general, a very big fan of simplicity. Like people get very complicated. I'm just not smart enough to be complicated. Which is why, by the way, it took me 10 years to get down to wisdom, love, responsibility, right? Because when I first got here, they gave me, I have it in my office, I can show it to you. I call it like this sundial. Like if you hold up the sun at 3:33, it'll shine on a certain point. You turn it 53 times, and it would give you like this massive thing about Aish philosophy, and I couldn't understand any of it, And so it took me 10 years to say, like, I need 3 words. I personally find Rav Noah's philosophy, the philosophy of Aish, to be so unbelievable. Right? When I came, there were 2 things I found that blew me away. One was God, this obsession with God. Right? No one talks about God like they do at Aish, whether it be this discovery or And the other piece was responsibility. Those are the 2, for anyone in business, the USPs, right? The unique selling points I found here more anywhere else. And I tried to distill it into 3 things, because if you can't explain something simply to someone, you can't really explain it on a large scale, right? So we started creating these clubs, and we needed a name for it. And so we took like the most kind of generic name, Jewish Student Union, right? Student Union sounds collegiate. High school kids want to be in college, right? So Student Union is a very collegiate type of thing. Jewish, it just made sense. And we started calling them JSU. And we started doing these things. And then, I would go to meetings it was a BJ, it was part of Federation, and everyone's like, "What are you doing? You're in these clubs, So I would walk in, I'd have a list of thousands of kids. I put it on the table with Reform, Conservative, or anyone that's in the room, say, "Go get these kids. Here they are." You think, I can't handle all these kids, right? And then you would find out that the organized Jewish community, they had to only service the kids in their synagogues and temples. It was crazy. No one was thinking about the average Jew on the street. And then what we did was we kind of pitched it to the rest of NCSY to say, "Hey, we have this great thing that's working. We're able to connect with these kids. You should try it out." At first, everyone's a little bit. Noah said this. He's absolutely correct. He says, in the beginning, everyone tells you you're crazy. then they start to copy you, and then they tell everyone it was their idea from the beginning, right? And that's when you're successful, right? And he's absolutely right. And so the ability to like see something like here, like we, and this is, I'm trying to give you the case study here. We saw an issue that no one was going after unaffiliated teens in LA, right? And why weren't they? Because there were so many affiliate teams, right? So in general, they were like, it was like, we have a bunch of kids. They weren't looking at that. We came up with a methodology to engage them, to find them, to go. And by the way, there's many hundreds of these GSU clubs still around. I don't even know. Like it kept continuing, et cetera, And then you try to figure out exactly how do you continue your journey? And then we created other things. One of the things we created was something called TJJ, Jerusalem Journey, right? Which was a trip totally for public school kids, right? And I have to tell you, the first time we did it, this guy Barry Goldfisher, I don't know if some of you involved in NCSY, he still I think runs TJJ, Barry. So the first time we ran it, right? I don't mind telling you, we had no idea what we're doing. Like we literally, no one had ever run a fully public school trip. This is 1998, I want to say. Wow. No one had run a fully public school trip to Israel, right? NCSY had trips with yeshiva kids on there and public school, except no one had just taken JSU, basically, like a bus full of JSU kids, to Israel. And I'll never forget, literally, we're sitting there before the first Shabbos going, what do we do? Like, do we do a Shabbaton? Do we do regular? We're trying to figure it out as we went along. And that summer was wild. I literally davened with a minyan once a week, Kabbalah Shabbos. Somehow we always wound up. But the rest of the time, we were just explaining to people. I personally wasn't able to daven with a minyan the entire summer. But I remember by the end, we had discovered something that I thought was really, really important. We basically decided that we were going to operate under the premise of tangible growth, right? And one of the issues you have spiritually, like on the one hand, like you guys are here, right? You don't want people sitting on you, like on your back, like, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Like, right? Because people need to grow at their own space, in their own way. You have to give people freedom to kind of be who they are and grow. That's also, I think, one of the benefits to Aish. Aish, I think, is very much like that. You do have space, you do have et cetera, right? But on the other hand, you don't want to get stuck at second gear, right? So what we did was we said, tangible growth. Tell us something you're going to go home with, right? It could be tzitzis, it could be davening, it could be. But what is the one thing you're going to go home and take with you, right? That you're gonna say when you come home. And it's very interesting. I'll tell this story because it's a great story. There's a guy there, Torontonians, Molitsky. You know Molitsky? Okay, when you go there, you look him up. He's a great guy. He's living there now. There's a guy, Molitsky, who was on our first TJJ bus. And we get to the end of summer, we're having meetings on tangible growth, And he says, I could go to yeshiva, but it has to have a wrestling team. My dad's really into wrestling, And so we're like, oh, wait a minute, MTA, Yeshiva University High School has a wrestling team. Next thing you know, he went to MTA, he went to Shalavim, he got smicha, and he went on this whole thing, right? So I guess what I'm trying to tell you with this whole thing, and by the way, feel free to ask me questions along the way, and I can give more examples, is that we saw a problem, and then we basically saw a way to solve it. And sometimes you're thinking, wait a minute, that's too easy. Like, why is no one seeing what I'm seeing, right? And people just get kind of stuck in thinking that way, So for example, let's fast forward to Aish, right? Rabbi Burg becomes Rosh 5-6 years ago, and basically says that we sit down, we say, okay, we have to figure out our vision, right? And one of the things I tell people, and you should remember this, is that vision without implementation is delusion, right? We're all very smart people, and we can have great visions of Jewish people, but if you don't know how to put it into play, it won't necessarily go anywhere. So we sit with Rabbi Burg and say, Rosh Hashanah, what would you like us to do? Rosh Hashanah says, and I remember him saying this, it was during COVID, we were on Zooms, but he said that the greatest chil Hashem, very much like Rav Noah, the greatest chil Hashem, the greatest desecration of God's name in the world is that the majority of Jews have no relationship with God. The way to solve that is to get them to study Torah. Full stop. And he said, so we're going to get 6 million Jews to study Torah. We're like, Rosh Hashanah, we're not getting 6 million. So we bargained them down to 3, right? To be a little practical. And we called it Aish Vision 2030, right? We said, next 10 years, how can we get 3 million Jews to study Torah? And then we took a step back and said, well, how can we do that? Social media. And we started getting very involved with social media, right? And Aish.com is around 25 years, right? And now we're getting very involved with AI because we're still trying to solve for issues that are out there. right? We're still trying to solve for issues that are out there, right? God, by definition, God wants Jews connected to Torah and Himself. By definition, God wants us in Israel. There's certain things that are just, that's what He wants, right? Right? If you really want a good checklist, read the Yud Gimel Ikar Emunah from the Rambam, right? So how do we help God get there, right? How do we help God achieve that? That's the challenge. And for those of you that went to business school, right, or those who are involved in business or in anything, you apply those principles here, or whatever you do. It's that simple, trying to apply those principles and trying to figure out how we get this thing solved. And now your generation is living in a whole different planet post October 7th, right? It's a different world than it was 3 years ago, right? On every single level. And I was telling this, I was at the WZO last night, the Jewish Agency board meetings. I'm a board member of the Jewish Agency, so I was there last night, and they had these WZO, World Zionist Organization meetings at the end, I was talking to someone, I'm trying to remember who it was, but I basically told them, every single person that we encounter today at Aish has an October 7th story. It has some influence on them, who they are, what they are. And the entire Jewish people, there is a whole generation now. You get into Israeli politics. Right? I talk about my two nephews who are both special forces and fought for 2.5 years. That generation is, in the next 10, 20 years, it's going to influence everything, right? Right now, we're living through a phase where people hate us everywhere. What do we do with that? Right? What's the right approach to that? Do we fight them? Are we going to win that battle? Right? I don't know. Do you think we are? You think we can?
We have enough.
What?
We have enough of us.
You think we can? The battle against anti-Semitism for all the non-Jews around the world?
Anti-Semitism? No.
Right. It's a hard battle,
end.
right? It's a hard. But one thing I can guarantee you: the more of us in the battle, the better we're going to do. Right? The more of us in the battle, the more we're going to do. I went to a wedding this past week, right, of an unbelievable family. The dad of the college, a very successful business, and the kids are amazing, And a Hasidic Yid came over to me, and basically the parents are Balei Tshuva, And he said all of this. He said, I know the Gemara that you save one life, you save the world. Yeah, I never believed it till I saw this wedding. But that's the question. How do we get more people with us fighting that fight, and being leaders when everything's against us? I'll pause for questions here, and then if not, and there's awkward silence, I'm happy to talk about more examples of things that we've tackled here. But any questions? I used to speak for NC I go to all the yeshivas and seminaries, and I go to seminaries, and there's always one girl there who is like the head of the Chesed club, and she'd feel bad for me, she'd raise her hand, And then I go to the guys' yeshivas, and they'd be like, I'm just gonna watch them burn. But I'm okay with awkward. So I'm an introvert by nature, so I'm totally fine with any lack of questions. But I'm happy to keep giving examples. I give a whole bunch more examples from
For the next few years, what do you think we should be doing with our time?
learning Torah. Learning Torah. And let me just explain what I mean by that. The word mashpia, to influence, comes from the word shefa, to overflow. Your cup has to be full if you want to overflow onto other people, right? Now, so I think a lot of you are probably in a moment that you have to make sure you have knowledge, right? It doesn't mean that there aren't many things you can't do along the way. I had one of I would say in some ways it was a hard decision for me. I walked into NCSY Shabbaton when I was 19, and I decided I wanted to be regional director, right? 9 years later, I became regional director of the West Coast, right? But that was it. I'm like, I like what they do here. This is where I want to be. I was there 22 years, So I'm there about 4 or 5 years, something like that, right? And I'm in YU. The way it works is you're in your dorm room and you're in Shear and you're doing whatever you're doing. And Shabbatonim, I'm flying to Detroit, I'm flying to Columbus, I'm driving to Pittsburgh, I'm going to all these Shabbaton. And every summer I'm going on a summer program, I'm doing all my things. And so that was my career path. That's what I wanted to do. I really had there's nothing else I even looked into. And then basically what happened was I got to a point where I was in Smicha and I had to make a decision, right? Whether I would take a year off to go to Gross Kollel. Right? Gross Kollel is in Beit Vegan. most people go married. My year was weird. We had 20 single guys, but like it happened to be usually it's like 3-4 single guys, mostly married guys. But it's Yeshiva University. You can go for a year there. Cool. And I had to make a decision. So I had like I was Central East. I was like running Central East. I was on this trajectory, and I basically had to make a decision whether I was going to take a year away from that, right? And it's kind of like, you know, a little nerve-wracking, right? You know what you want to do. You're on a career path, right? And I decided to go. And I remember I spoke with the Cumses. I think it was at Camp Wise in Cleveland. I don't know, it was Camp Cleveland. It was one of these camps outside of Cleveland, whatever it was, you know. We spoke with the Cumses, and I talked about that decision, and I said, basically, so I would be a hypocrite if I was sitting here telling all of you to do what you're doing, to get close to God, all those pieces, you know, and I didn't do this myself. So as hard as that decision was, I basically, you know, so I would say you also, like, you have to make sure that you've got Torah content. Without Torah content, it doesn't work as well, no matter what you do. Having said that, there's so many programs and things you can be involved in, and, you know, partners in Torah and et cetera. There's a lot you can do along the way, you know, but make sure with your band that you filled yourself up with the content that you need. Yeah.
So you're touching on this now. What you mean by fill yourself up? You're saying content, but like how does something like learning Gemara and Yeshiva help you in Kibbutz? That's just like one example. I'm asking essentially if you can define what that means to fill yourself up.
Well, it fills you up with everything. It's Gemara, Halacha, Torah. Everything is about how God looks at the world. So it doesn't matter what you're learning. You're basically getting in sync with God. But you know, I just one of our Talmidim, David Milstein, just got engaged. You know, I don't know David. He's a little bit older. I mean, everybody else knows David. Really, really great guy. David is he works at the U.S. Embassy now. He's Huckabee's senior advisor. He runs the embassy here. If you ever see Ambassador Huckabee, and there's a guy with blondish hair with a yarmulke, that's David standing right next to him. David was totally not connected, didn't grow up religious at all in Philadelphia, and he was working with Ted Cruz for a number of years, and then basically was dabbling with coming back. Make a long story short, he took off 6 months and came to Aish. And became Shomer Shabbos, Shomer Kashrus, you know. Baruch Hashem, he just got engaged, he's getting married in a couple months. And now that his parents, his family are amazing people. So his stepfather is Mark Levin. Ever watch Fox News? So on Fox News, Life, Liberty, Levin. He's like he is probably the closest right-wing commentator to Trump. You know, and he is the one fighting the fight for us every single day. And a lot of that is due to David's influence on their family. They're very close, and David, you know, it's an amazing journey, you know. And I called Mark up, which master, you know, and I said, I quoted a Gemara. Let's get back to the Gemara. I quoted a Gemara to him. I said, you know, it says in the Gemara that God Himself makes shidduchim, right? God doesn't. He doesn't delegate to anyone, right? Hashem Himself makes shidduchim. I said, because how else, Mark? You know, Dave's engaged to a girl who grew up in a Chabad family in Australia. October 7th comes, she's so inspired, she moves to Israel. David's coming from like no background to like how else in the world can this work except for, you know? So that's an example of Gemara. Like you read that and like it even took me years to appreciate or understand it. And I find that with like a lot of Gemara. Gemara is not just it's not just teaching you stuff, it's teaching you how to think. And when I say how to think, I don't mean like intellectually, I mean how to think like God, right? The greatest level that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved was Eved Hashem. He was God's servant, right? Like the number one title that he, you know, what does it mean by servant? Servant of God means basically a servant. I serve you, I want to serve you, and I serve you so well that I know in advance what you want. You don't even have to ask me at that point, right? And I think a Jew's goal in this planet is to just figure out what God wants us to do. And I don't know how you do that without Torah, right? Now, I'm happy, and I've said this many times, Torah mitzvahs is a means to an end. If you're doing Torah mitzvahs and you don't wind up at God, that's a problem. And many in the Orthodox world struggle from that, right? It's actually an issue in the Orthodox world. Many people are like, they're doing stuff, but they're not making it to the finish line by God. But you can't really have one without the other. So I think in terms of Gemara, in terms of these things, I think you'd be shocked. I feel people like learning Gemara, like, or, you know, it just there's a certain thing switch that flips on your brain, right? Now, by the way, the practical side is there's so many great things that you can save up and use, to teach people, so many amazing things. But just if nothing else, you just immerse in it. It puts you where you need to be. Yes.
No, there's something behind me.
No, go ahead.
What do you think like Aish is falling behind on? Like what are we lacking and what?
Nothing. We're amazing. Okay. Yeah. So, what are we falling behind on? I think our alumni. I think that Aish has to do a better job. Our alumni, right now, we're the largest we've ever been. It's like crazy. People are like, oh, I'm like, Aish, we're in the middle of construction, 150 beds in Torah. So, like, we're just as large as we've ever been. We have a seminar, like, massive, bigger than we've been in 51 years. I think that the organization has to do a better job at helping to stay connected to and guard our alumni, to stick within our philosophy, to change the world. That I don't think we've conquered yet, not for lack of desire, but to me, that's probably the most important thing I can see over the next 5 to 10 years that we have to do. We have to be in movement, and we've got to get more and more people in our movement. Wisdom, love, responsibility to change the world. Like that's not, and the way you do it, change the world sounds like a beautiful thing, but it's because you think about exactly how to keep people within the movement and moving forward. In my mind, I'm just one vote, but that's what I think is the most important. Or else,
What character traits do you think are most important for us to develop if we want to make an impact in the future?
I think there's two character traits that I always used to look at. I think I probably still do when I hired people that I was always kind of looking for. The first is humility. Right? When I say humility, I'm not looking for someone that can like take it to hill and go in the corner and rattle them off, or like say I'm nothing, the old joke, right? Two guys are sitting there saying they're nothing. And the third guy sits down and says he's nothing, and goes, look who thinks he's nothing, So that's like the extreme, that's the extreme, right? So it's not that. I think humility is the ability to learn from every single person, right? There are people, they're wonderful people in Kiru that just can't bring themselves to learn from others. I've always been very blessed by being the least intelligent guy in any room I walk into. So like I look around and I'm like, these guys are all smarter than me, they know how to do things better than me, and let's figure out how to do this. Now my job as CEO, by the way, is to be the conductor of the orchestra, right? Because while these guys are playing, great violins over here, and they've got all these different pieces, right? If we're all going different notes, different speeds, it's not working, right? It's how to get everyone together. So I think the humility, in order to respect and be able to learn from everyone else and continue to grow, I think is really important. The other one is relentlessness, absolute relentlessness. I would say the people that were successful, I was in NCSY, so teenagers, want to hang out with cool people. And I remember there was this one chapter director who was not cool at all, just not. And we would get to regional conventions, and they would have like double or triple what everyone else had, and it was because they were a little relentless. Just the kid says, oh yeah, I don't think I can go. Why can't you go? No, I can't get a ride. I'll get your ride. The relentlessness is like I really care and I really want to make it happen. So I think that those two pieces are really, I think humility coupled with relentlessness is why people can be successul. Yeah.
Once we filled up with Torah, as you said, we want to get into the Kiruv, we want to help Jewish people. What step do we take? What are our first few moves? Like, it's not always so easy to find the job or find the thing that's needing help. Where do we start?
It depends. Look, some people will tell you should become a rabbi and go into Kiruv, stuff like that. I'm not one of them. Not because I don't think, that's what I did. So I'm not poo-pooing it. But there's 1,000 different ways to be able to do that. I know many people who are outstanding, in their work for the community. Outstanding, like really people that are, are working for the community. I just was with, for Shabbos, Sander Gerber. I don't know if you know the Gerber family. Well, you might know them because that doorway that you walked in today was given by their family. And by the way, you will never, the Gerber name actually doesn't appear anywhere on the door. They didn't want their name on there, but their kids' names are on there because they want their kids to have a place in Shalom. Very, very humble people. Sander Gerber is someone I've known for 11 years. He's a hedge fund, Hudson Bay Capital. We can look him up. He's extraordinarily successful. And 11 years ago, I kid you not, 11 years ago, I was here for a couple months, and Ephraim Shore brought me to his house for a Shabbos meal for lunch, because I was here for whatever was in Kippur, and I was going back home for Sukkot, and afterwards he sits down, and he and his wife are Bali Chu, and they have a beautiful, unbelievable family, 7 kids, and he starts to tell me about the Palestinian Authority, and they're paying the families of terrorists, and this is crazy, and this, this is, and I'm listening like enamored, like, wow, that's unbelievable. Next thing I know, he goes out and he passes single-handed, he wants to pass this legislation, and he's on the board of AIPAC. AIPAC says, no, you can't do this. He goes, okay, I'm resigning from the board. He resigns the board of AIPAC. He decides this is really, really important. He decides he needs a slogan, so he pays some marketing guy a little bit of money who comes up with pay for slay, and he passes legislation in America basically holding back money from the Palestinian Authority that they're giving to terrorists that kill Jews, right? Then he sees the Israeli side, wait a minute, they're still giving the money because they're nervous of that. He passes legislation here. Today, you can Google his name, he's actually on the United States Intelligence Oversight Committee. There's like 10 Balabatim, who he's unbelievable. He's really one of those unbelievable people I know, and seeking Torah. Like I was just at the wedding of his daughter, and he gets up and he gave her a copy. They learned Cholos Labolos together, so he got her a copy from I think it was like the 1500s or something. And the Torah that exudes from this person. On the other hand, he passed legislation to save Jewish lives, by himself, because the organized Jewish community was not interested in pay for slay. Now, by the way, how many people have heard of pay for slay, right? This guy literally, he said, this is crazy. And everyone's like, God, don't bother with it. And he, so there's an example of a successful hedge fund guy who's like tremendous Ben Torah. His kids are unbelievable, and he's fighting for the Jewish people. So I think the important thing to realize is that it's there's so many different ways to do this. And I'm not even telling you to do it with Aish, right? There are so many great organizations out there, right? I think Aish has to be the kind of big tent, huge organization that, one of our fundraisers is leaving, right? Stroll Katz, right? When he's leaving, right? And because he got a job as CEO of a Israeli mental health place. I'm thrilled for him. Thrilled. And I told him that, thrilled that someone that got trained by Aish is now going to lead another organization. And we had something called Value, which is where our outreach to Israelis, run by Shimi Kaufman and Teal Golda, right? And they had grown as much as they could within Aish, and we spun them off, and we gave money their first year. We said, go do your thing, right? Aish has to be the mothership, right, of inspiring people to then go out and spread our movement around the world. We can't, you can't like suffocate your child by that bear hug, right? And so I think there are a lot of ways to do it. I think you have to speak to your Rabbanim. You have to, one day, there's a Shem, speak to your wife, or whatever, and you have to plan out what do you think you're going to be the most effective. I have to tell you, by the way, I've been doing this a long time. I'm still trying to figure it out. So you should know, in case you think you're going to get to a place, I'm still trying to figure out. But I will say that in general, the jobs I took on were the jobs that no one else wanted, that I felt I could do that other people weren't. And I've spoken to Rosh about this. I'm not sure where I am now. After 11 years, Aish is on a good trajectory. I feel like I need to go fix something. I fix broken things. It's my thing. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure out myself. So I'm probably the same what you are. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.